the cost of peril.
Today's discussion will be between Miss Daniela Yaffe of Israel, Miss Miriam Daftari of Iran, Mr. Hassan Koshvildis of Turkey, and Miss Nadia Balba of the United Arab Republic.
It's written on your parliament. I don't know, somewhere in the building there.
We've been talking about how one nation can help another. No, you're right on the ball here, Nadia. But how can one nation help another?
Well, Miss Waller, I think that it's not as simple as that. I think it's more complicated than we think it is. Because when coming, I just had my definite patterns of thought, and
that
I
was
really
what, 2 months ago?
Yes, I didn't question anything because I really thought what I believed was just the right thing. I mean, and now I'm beginning to think about it, and I'm beginning to question some of the things I believe.
Well, now, what are some of them? Can you think back to your arrival in the States 2 months ago? What are some of the things you were definite about?
Well, I really thought that Iran was the country where I would consider freedom was right, and then coming to the United States, I find what I'd heard, that there is freedom in the United States, and now I'm beginning to question whether our freedom is really freedom.
Well, I think that the most important thing I learned here was to start a dialogue, and instead of going on with my own monologue, I learned to speak to people and to share their ideas and to find out the truth in them, and not to believe that what I say is the only truth.
Yes, same with me. I now try to think and listen instead of talk.
I think we find lots of common things between us and the American youth. For instance, I mean, we find out that also the Americans and also our people as we are exactly, I mean, have the same feelings I have, sometimes the same ideas, sometimes same problems, youth problems that we have all over the world. And these are just common things that we have all over the world.
Well, now tell me some more about this, your relations with American young people your age and what you found in common with them.
I had quite an experience because in all these schools I've been to, most of them say, you're an American. Sometimes they take me for an American, and I don't know whether to take this as an insult or some flattery.
Well, I had quite a different experience. I spoke to a boy once, and I knew he had a very faint idea about everything. So he told me, where'd you come from? I told him, I come from Africa. So he stared at me, he said, Africa? I mean, he was just stunned. I don't know how he thought I was going to be, but, well, there are still many similarities between young people everywhere.
And I think, yeah, when we were at Williamsburg, the students were the American students were talking about the other delegates and trying to learn about the other countries. And one of the roommates of me told me, do you have a communist delegate? I said, yes. Where is he from? I said, he's from Yugoslavia. Where is he? I'm gonna kill him.
Would you say that there's anything that you have in common with each other that you don't have in common with Americans your age?
Well, I think it's a matter of point of view, how you look at things. I mean, I would never consider myself, I mean, if somebody, we'd never consider ourselves Arabs. And in the United States, they told me, you're an Arab, and I sort of, me, an Arab. I mean, it's just different ways of putting it.
Well, maybe they were learning about the old empire when Persia was conquered.
Oh, yeah.
Lots of comments together, especially, I mean, this maybe our area, because we all come from one part of the world. So it mustn't be, I don't think that feeling problems or these things, but problems that concern our areas.
Now, talk to us a bit about that. You do all come from, in general, the Middle Eastern area, even though you aren't an Arab and you're a Turk. What are some of the problems that you've got in common?
Well, I think, yes, this is one of the problems, and it's also overpopulation and standard of living, which isn't very high, I think. But as many people like to put it, we are not underdeveloped countries, we are developing countries, and I think there's a difference between the two terms. We are countries which are progressing, but we are not underdeveloped.
You also aren't a political vacuum, are you?
Oh, no, we're not.
I remember your reaction when somebody spoke of you as being a political vacuum.
I remember.
Well, we don't have the overpopulation problem, but we have the problem of having more water and just raising our standard of living.
We too,
as
we
a
don't have
nation.
overpopulation problem, and we don't have a problem of, I mean, Israel is not considered as one of the underdeveloped countries or country which has to make a progress. We are considered as a very modern country in the world, but still the water is a very, very big problem. One of our biggest problems.
Well, of course, we're all, every
Right.
country is in the stage of progressing. It isn't that there's no limit to progressing.
Yes.
How do you learn about each other's countries? Where do you get, and have you changed your feeling about each other's countries? Yes?
Well, first of all, we learn about other countries in our school, in our history, in our geography, and in some other lessons, and also by means of our own press, our local press, and the other people who can read English or some other French or German magazines or newspapers. Well, everybody can buy them in the big cities in Turkey. So
Well,
they
Hassan,
can learn
what do you
about.
learn, for example, about Iran, about Egypt, about Israel? What's your image of these countries, according to what you learn at home?
Well, not very much about the people.
Well, about the countries.
About the countries, in our geography lesson, we learn everything about these countries. I mean, geographical and
No, but what do you
historical.
think? What does the average Turk think of an Iranian or an Egyptian or an Israeli?
Well, I don't think that these geography and history lessons
Well-
impress a lot on the people. I don't think so. But about it all depends on our own local press, I think. But
Yes.
I don't.
I mean,
think
in school you learn more about the policy of the country,
Exactly.
Yeah.
and here
Yes.
we've had the opportunity
Yeah.
to see the people. Like before I
Yeah.
came, when I thought of the United States, I thought of the policy or of Britain, but now I think of the people.
Yeah.
Yes, it was the same thing with me. I mean, you just don't think of individuals and people when you live in a country. I mean, I judged all the Americans by Foster Dulles and all the British by Macmillan, and of course my opinion wasn't very good after judging them by Foster Dulles and Macmillan. Well, this is a mistake you often do. You just mix both things, the people and the policy.
But
Well-
when you learn it in school, I mean, they can't give you a picture of the people. They have to give you a picture either of the past. The past is always, you learn something of the type of life of the people, but you learn about their government, their policy. And I think the only possibility in order to get to know people and not policy is by exchanging ideas and sitting and talking and visiting these countries in order to see the people. Otherwise, by newspapers, you only know the policy.
How can you do this, though? You inhabit a very small area of the world, but there isn't very much contact here.
I
is
think
there?
by one thing, as a forum, I mean, this is one thing how you do it.
Yeah, but you're going
by
home
such
in
things.
3 weeks now.
But then it hasn't ended there. I think that's where it begins.
For us,
Well-
not for
Oh,
all
yeah.
the people.
Yes.
And it's how we can influence other people and try to open the window which has been opened to us.
Mrs. Waller,
I
I think we'll begin to think when we go back. I'm quite sure that we'll begin to think what we thought here and what we did here when we go back. I think.
You're saying
That's
that the
my-
impact will begin
yeah.
to come after you get home rather than here. Well, not
Yes.
it.
I think that now when I go back to my country, I won't think of my country as just, a speck in a big universe, and standing alone, but I'll think of my country as part of a big wide world with a lot of connection, and I'll think of people also, all living in that world, and I believe that this will help establish relations, not me personally, but if there are more programs like that, and if people come to the conclusion of thinking about other people, this will help a lot.
Yes, I think the word people means a different thing to me now than it did.
Now, look, it's all very easy to say that you should think, when you think of another country, you should think in terms of people instead of policy. But to what extent can one really do that?
Yes, I think this is one of the jobs that we might have to do when we come home. Explain them that someone is a human being exactly like I am. He has different ideas, his government is different. But perhaps by knowing that we all are people, we can one day come to a conclusion. Only by touch we can make something active.
No, be a little more specific.
I think that young people all over the world are a little bit idealistic. I mean, they have a tendency to believe that there could be a world government. Of course, this is looking too far, but they always have a tendency to being a little bit idealistic and to be influenced. So I believe if I come back, for instance, and talk to young people my age, they just want to be convinced. I mean, they live in a kind of a dream, and they also know that, I mean, young people their age all over the world, they just can't be that different. I mean, there must be a certain link between them, and they have a tendency to believe that.
But obviously, in order to survive the whole world, we must really face reality and look at the world we have so that we can see the world we want.
But you have to have a certain idea to go towards it, and then have the, because if you just live in the reality, I don't think you can change much. You have to have a certain idea and try to reach it. And
that's what worries me, Daniela. The reality is the policy. And how long can a young person, as idealistic as possible, how long can that idealism survive when we see how the whole world is sort of divided now between two great powers, two great ideologies, and then in other parts of the world there are lesser ideologies and hatreds?
Well, I suppose there's no, it couldn't possibly be otherwise than these two powers, that you have these two great ideologies, which it seems now that you have to choose.
Well, I don't think that's fair to put the small countries in a position to choose, because this is selfishness and a little bit of weakness on both parties. Because
you mean a weakness both on the part of the USSR and the part of the United States?
But I would say that mostly the United States has put the small countries in a position to choose mostly. It's selfishness, because those small countries have problems within their country, problems of overpopulation, economical problems. I mean, such big problems they just have to deal with. Excuse me. And I believe this is a kind of selfishness and also weakness, not to be able to assume the responsibility alone and to drag other small nations with you. I mean, other nations who have nothing to do with that problem. We are not so concerned about communism in Egypt and in Syria. We're not so concerned about communism. But America seems so concerned about communism and just wants it to pass through your throat, and I don't think that's fair.
She has to be concerned about it. We must face reality. I mean, she has this dividing line, whether to have these countries on her side. Of course, she must try to help other countries so that she gets allies on her side.
And yes, one thing I agree with you. They shouldn't try to give a vote. I mean, not in the the full sense of the word vote, but I mean, I think Russia does the same. And besides, I don't think they should let them vote either here or there. But you can't expect of one big nation helping you, and I mean, I don't mean you personally, and you go to someone else and help the enemy of this nation. There has to be something.
Then if you start with that point, where are we going? The word peace will be nothing but a chimera, because if it's always that struggle between two ideologies, don't forget that the small nations are those who make the policy, in a way. Are those who make the policy. So if they're asked to go on one side or the other, there will always be that struggle between the two nations.
But then,
and this is something we
but
don't
if
want.
you can't possibly work on both sides of the street in life, just take yourself as an individual. You have to choose.
You can be neutral.
And as a nation,
you can be neutral.
You can choose both as long as there is no peace and no common idea in both. And always you have, it is quite natural, you always are a bit more. You can't be very neutral.
You don't choose
Wait a minute, give Hassan.
I think it's impossible to be neutral, Nadia.
Oh, I think it is.
No, I don't think it is. Because today there are two great powers in the world, right? United States and Russia. You have to be on one side.
Why?
Why do you?
Why
in
can't
which side
you?
are
Why
you now?
Because you choose one side, one way of life.
Yeah.
No, why can't
You
you
have two
seek
big
your
ideas and
interest?
you choose one idea.
Wait,
Why can't you seek your interest? I mean, look, this is a struggle between two ideologies, between communism and capitalism. And the small nations have other problems. They want to improve their standard of living. Why should they be asked to choose between those two ideologies?
I agree with you. They shouldn't. But
Hassan just said that we have to choose. We can't remain neutral. Why?
You said, for instance, now, first of all, I want to say that the communism is not the opposite of capitalism. It's quite different.
But you see, here again, we don't agree. I think that capitalism is the opposite of communism.
No, it's not.
Then it's the opposite of what?
Of socialism. I mean, the capitalism is the opposite of socialism. So communism is the enforcing. The socialism is the enforcing way of communism. Now,
we don't want to get lost in definitions
Exactly.
here.
I mean, we're not discussing.
But I'd like you to make your point and then hear if Miriam has the same or a different one. You were about to show why a country, from your point of view, should not be put in the position of having to choose between Russia and the United States. Convince us on that, will you?
Yes, because I believe that we have certain interests. For instance, the United States always has said that there is a political vacuum in the Middle East, and that this vacuum must be filled by one of the big nations, either the USSR or the United States, while we believe that this vacuum could be filled by the Arab nations, because they have a common interest, they have a common link, they speak the same language, they have the same religion, therefore they can stand together. We don't want to be put into the position of choosing either between Russia or America, because we believe that
it's not choosing America or the USSR. It's choosing the idea.
A way of life.
And it's because Iran is very proud of her heritage of freedom, like the United States, that we side with the United States. So it's not the country, but the idea. That's
well, by accepting Russia's help, do you think that we are submitting ourselves to Russia's ideology?
I don't know, but I think there is, in a way, yes, in a way. I mean, they wouldn't give just help. This is the policy that's the bad, that might be the sad thing about it, that a nation, when it helps another, it is always with a bit pulling strings. This might be the sad thing. We might want to come to such an idealistic point where a nation will only help in order to help. But they help because they want something back.
But why does America help Israel?
I mean, this is true. We don't accept any aid from Russia. America helps us. But we live according to a certain idea of America.
Then here again we come to a certain contradiction. America speaks a lot about democracy. Democracy is to choose. I mean, here you are.
They don't
America
want us to choose democracy.
No, they don't. I know that. But here again, you can't accept Russia's help. Then you're not given any kind of choice.
We don't want to accept it. We don't want even. We are not interested in their help.
But aren't you interested in improving your standard of living?
Yes,
that's why they're helping us.
Would you refuse money which will help improve your standard of living?
No, but we don't. But we have an. I mean, we get the aid from America, and we have enough with this. We don't need Russia's aid.
I think there must be some distinction between the economic aid we get and the military aid we get. There must be a dividing line there. Because why do they help us? To bring about a more equal world economy.
What kind of aid do you get?
The United States helps us through the Point 4 program, which is giving economic aid, agriculture, and so on. We also take military aid also, but the chief emphasis is on the economic.
So you see, we, for instance, I can say, I mean, one thing, we didn't get anything of military aid from the United States. We get economical aid, we get money, we get people, but we didn't get any military aid.
Sometimes nations, I think, are put, like Middle East nations, are put in a straitjacket, and they have to make a choice, like when the UAR had to, was desperate, and she just had to accept arms from Russia because no matter what the cost or peril, because of the Israeli expansion.
There is no Israeli expansion.
Well, I think there is, but
I think there isn't, and I'm sure there is.
It's a matter of looking at the point of view. That's how I think nations differ from each other. They look from their own point of view. That's what makes nations different.
But, I mean, you can talk about point of view when it comes to a fact, but there was no fact like this, so on what basis do you say?
Oh, just one thing. I mean, the all the time jumping on demarcation line in Syria and
who
in
jumped?
Jordan.
Who the first jumped?
Well, I think it's Israel.
Oh, so, I mean, we don't agree.
Anyway, I don't think we're discussing
that
problem.
Of course, I don't think we agree on many things, but we can look at the similarity.
Well, I'd like to come back to your point because I don't think you got a complete answer. You said, isn't this a contradiction? On the one hand, you said a country shouldn't have to choose between one or the other. And then I believe, Daniela, Nadia said to you, aren't you having to choose, since you say that you will accept American aid and you won't accept Russian aid? Was that your point?
Yes.
Yeah, we don't have to choose, no. I mean...
One question.
yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. If you accept Russia's help, will America give you aid then?
I don't know. I really don't know. But, I mean, there is no matter to talk about this because we don't get Russian help because we have the democracy. I mean, before, when the State of Israel was established, this is the kind of government we have, and it agrees, I mean, perhaps not in everything, but it is more perhaps an American type. It's no communism. And we get the help from America. They don't make us choose.
Let's ask Turkey about this question.
Well, I still agree. I still disagree with Nadia because, as I said before, one must choose one side because our countries, these countries in the Middle East, are not so stable. So we have to choose either U.S. or Russia. So you said, Daniel is talking, and you're talking about if you get aid from Russia, then will the United States give you aid? Well, I cannot answer that question either, but I think the best way to be one of these countries to be with the United States. So, and I want to point, well, why are you with Russia, or are you with Russia now?
We're accepting Russia's
Yes.
aid, but we're more than willing to accept America's aid if America offers to help us.
Why don't you want to be neutral? You know, just...
But that's what we want, and that's what America is refusing. Be with us or against us.
But then if America helps you, she wants you not to have aid from Russia. I mean, it's so different the way the Russians help. Like, what was it, in 1947 when Russia was helping India with her famine problem. And she didn't say anything about it, but I suppose afterwards, and usually they send, may we send some technicians or something of the sort, and there you start the subversion.
Well, Nadia, let's carry your point. I think it's a very valid one. Let's carry it a step further. Suppose that you can continue with your positive neutrality now, all the countries in the Middle East, getting necessary help from both America and Russia without political influence. What kind of political system do you think will eventually evolve there in the Middle East? Is that a fair question?
Yes, I think so. Well, I think that right now what we want in the Middle East is economical aid through the United Nations. This is the best thing. It's more of, it isn't a political union. What we want in the Middle East right now is not a political union. It's more an economical union on regional basis, that all the countries which have common interests, and I mean, for instance, Egypt is an agricultural country. Saudi Arabia has the oil. Instead of having so many small markets, we could have one common market, one strong market, and one strong economy.
One thing I just want to add here, I mean, Nadia talks about the Middle East, and of course she talks more about one side of the Middle East. We are the second side of the Middle East. I mean, I think a community market would be something idealistic for the Middle East with Israel. I mean, this we can't reach now. I mean, this can be our ideal for the future, perhaps for the near or for the far future. But if we would reach such a day where there would be peace, I think that all these countries together, one has oil, one has culture, one has agriculture, everyone has something else. If we can produce something together as the Middle East.
Well, now, for example, what could you get from Egypt that you need?
I don't know. No.
And what could you get from Israel that you need?
I don't know much
I think
about
Nadia could tell me
I
what
know.
she could give me, and I could
All
tell
right,
what-
you tell Nadia what Israel could give Egypt.
First of all, doctors. This is the first thing. I mean, just one thing that I just read recently in the newspaper was that in Egypt, you can tell me if it's true, in Egypt the most biggest percent in the world of people that have trouble with their eyes. In Israel, we have for every 450 people a doctor, which is very, very good. I mean, we have too much doctors perhaps. And I mean, also from the culture part, from the modern part,
I mean, this is improving. The medical point of view is improving a great deal in Egypt. But I think, as Daniela said, this is being too idealistic, and by looking, considering a union of the Middle East countries with Israel.
But Israel belongs to the Middle East.
But we are talking about a political union now. I was projecting into the future.
Yes, but
how economically can your countries help each other? I think this medical point is...
Well, I think there's a common problem in the Middle East, and this is water, and this is a problem we all have. So by joining our efforts, maybe we can... something might come out of it. But, well, it's all right to consider an economical union with the Arab countries, but I don't think that when Israel comes in, it's very difficult to separate the two things, the economical and the political part.
No, it can be only when there will be such a day where
because it's very difficult to separate the two things. I mean, they're joined together.
I think such things like the Baghdad Pact are very important for the stability of the Middle East. Like, I didn't know, I recently read that the Baghdad Pact had an economic committee which gives technical assistance. That is something I think wonderful. I think there should be more of this unity which gives us security for the whole Middle East.
Well, frankly, we are not for the Baghdad Pact.
Yes, I know that.
Frankly, I mean, this is the point. We are not for the Baghdad Pact because I believe that this threatens, we believe, all of us, and I do, that this threatens our freedom, because the Baghdad Pact and the Atlantic Pact and the Eisenhower Doctrine and all this, they all mention a defense from communism, but they've never mentioned a defense from the Western countries, and we have suffered from the Western countries, not from communism.
I don't blame you for thinking that way.
Well, I think you've made your point positively. And also, one thing I'll take away from this is your idea that perhaps if aid could be administered through an international organization rather than bilaterally.
Yes. But I think one private organization, a governmental organization, and international organization, if they are not exaggerating by help and not limiting it too much, it can be always useful. If we can reach an, I think, this I agree, an international one can be perhaps the best. But every kind of aid, as long as it's...
Sorry, we've got to stop here. Next week, I'm sorry.
I wanted to make one point.
Next week, we'll talk about the same problem in another area in Africa. Until next week, then.